Banjul, capital of the Gambia, also known as the Smiling Coast of West Africa. The country provided the enabling ambience for hosting the 2023 International Conference of the Ecowas Court of Justice. About 300 guests from Ecowas member states converged for the annual forum the Ecowas Court of Justice has created for discussing contemporary issues pertinent to the sub-regional agenda. The conference venue was Sir Dauda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center. From the 22nd to the 25th of May 2023, the center was a beehive of activities as the Ecowas Court International Conference ran its course. The theme of the 2023 International Conference was Ecowas, Zero Tolerance for Unconstitutional Change of Government. Ministers of Justice and Chief Justices of Member States, judges of the Ecowas Court of Justice, members of the bar and the bench from all member states, as well as legal scholars, were joined by heads of ECOWAS institutions, heads of ECOWAS national offices in member states, members of the diplomatic corps, and law students. President of the Ecowas Court of Justice, Justice Edward Ashante, welcomed the conference participants at the opening ceremony and explained the choice of the conference theme. It is to focus on the need for participatory democracy and constitutional order in all ECOWAS member states.
The theme of this conference, ECOWAS's Zero Tolerance for Unconstitutional Change of Government. This theme is a burning issue, the violation of which is of very grave concern in our community, and it was very carefully chosen by the court because of the several incidents of unconstitutional change of government that we have witnessed in our sub-region in recent years. The intervention of the armed forces in governance is an aberration that greatly undermines constitutional order, rule of law, and participatory democracy. It also hampers economic development, foreign direct investments in the economies of such countries, which are invariably further subjected to economic sanctions. It also undermines the human rights regime. In this day and age, the international community has no stomach for military coups, and such states invariably become pariah states in the Committee of Nations. ECOWAS has equally demonstrated that it has zero tolerance for such unconstitutional changes in government. I am confident that this conference will be very fruitful and that the outcome will be useful in charting a way forward to prevent future unconstitutional changes in government within our sub-region.
Speaker of the ECOWAS Parliament, Sidi Mohamed Tunis, echoed these sentiments as he urged participants to reflect on the theme.
The mechanism for preventing unconstitutional changes is by attacking the root of the evil, which remains respect by leaders of limits of mandates and the rules of good political and economic governance. Now is the time to put an end to the tampering with constitutions and to make accountability prevail.
It was a message that resonated with representatives of other ECOWAS institutions.
As far as EBID is concerned, we cannot overstress the need for a peaceful and well-governed environment, as this would positively impact our rating and therefore enable us to immobilize resources at a reasonable cost for the benefit of our populations. Therefore, it is important that Ecowas adhere to this stance and impress upon countries in such situations the importance of upholding the rule of law while addressing the needs of the people.
President of the Ecowas Commission, Dr. Umaru Aliyu Toure, reaffirmed the firm stance of Ecowas against unconstitutional change of government.
It is only fitting that the judiciary, which we all know as a third arm of government, should spend some time to dilate on the issue of undemocratic changes of government, as it is, ironically, when such changes occur, they are in some cases the only arm of government that remains relatively intact in form, if not necessarily in practice. The ECOWAS Commission remains firm in its stance of zero tolerance to unconstitutional change of government. Over the past few years, the region has seen an unwelcome backslide into the era of coups and other undemocratic practices. This has meant that the Commission is spending resources that could have been used for much-needed development activities on peace support operations. Whilst the Ecowas Commission will continue to sanction and take other agreed measures to ensure the return to democratic rule, the simple fact remains that prevention is always better than cure. Coups like COVID and other infectious diseases must be prevented because if they are allowed to occur, their repercussions and effects may last long after the original symptoms have been addressed.
The guest speaker at the 2023 International Conference, Professor Chidi Odinkano, provided context for profound examination and cross-examination of the conference theme.
Africa, by the way, has provided 43.8% of the 486 coups recorded globally since 1950. And we've also recorded 44.26% of the successful coups globally. West Africa has provided over 50% of that number. And on the whole, there have been about 169 incidents of coups, attempted coups, and mutinies in West Africa alone. We do have geospatial overlaps. And you have this work on this particular issue of unconstitutional changes in government taking place within l'UEMOA, the ECOWAS, the African Union, contemporaneously. And enforcement and compliance norms are not particularly well aligned. And that, I would like to suggest, is one of the issues we've got to address over the course of this particular meeting. Coordination between the various regional institutions that are implicated in the subject matter of unconstitutional changes in government. We have to condemn soldiers, but let's also condemn political adventurers. And let me try and end very quickly, because something is happening. And this is where it concerns all of us. We have to defend our judges. What is happening now is they are no longer amending constitutions. They are going to terrorize the judges to give them tenure extension. And that is a gap in the normative infrastructure. What happens when you get a court order to extend the tenure of a president?
Drawing from the experience of the Gambia, President Adama Barrow of the Gambia told participants that the conference theme was a call to action.
Through our struggles, we have learned the importance of democracy, not merely as a system of government, but as a philosophy, as a way of life. Democracy is about listening even when we disagree. It is about respecting the rule of law even when we don't understand it. It is about adhering to the Constitution even when it seems inconvenient. Democracy is about recognizing the dignity of every individual, respecting their rights, their freedom, and their voice. It requires a commitment to justice, to fairness, and to the principles of equality. And it demands that we work tirelessly to create a society where every voice is heard, every opinion is respected, and every right is protected. The Ecowas stance of zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government sends a clear message to every corner of our region that democracy is not just an option but an absolute requirement. On that note, I gladly and with honor declare this conference open.
Mama tamba for you, Chinanga. 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 Koli boita, koli kane jome, Chinanga. Koli boita, koli kane jome. Sitamu ko koli boita jome, Chinanga. Bitala yakari ale, bitala yakari ale.
For 3 days, conference participants went on to exhaustively dissect the conference theme under 7 sub-themes. There were 7 panel discussions with presentations by resource persons constituted of legal luminaries, academics, and subject matter specialists, as well as plenary discussions. Judges of the Ecowas Community Court of Justice, chief justices of member states, and legal luminaries moderated the sessions deftly with their wealth of experience.
There is no gainsaying the fact that these unconstitutional change of government, undermine democracy, rule of law, and often lead to human rights violations.
E o diálogo tem que ser instrumento que a África tem que cultivar. Eu falo da África, falo dos dirigentes, também do próprio povo, porque não é só ir à rua manifestar-se. O povo tem que ter outros mecanismos de intervenção, que não só ir à rua e manifestar-se.
I've observed with great concern that most of the coup d'etats that happen in Africa, for instance, are done by junior members of the army. And these are people, I don't know how well they understand what ECOWAS is about, whether they know the rules and regulations governing ECOWAS, whether they know the punishments or maybe the sanctions that are available if they carry out such deeds.
I believe that it would be useful to highlight the piece around the role that young people should be playing and the protections that should be available to them by virtue of their role in the social space.
Has the AU expelled these countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, etc.? No. And you know, sometimes it's good to lean on a parent organization.
Dans tous les cas, essayons de voir d'abord l'efficacité des sanctions existantes avant de chercher à augmenter. Parce que je ne crois pas qu'on puisse imaginer des sanctions plus graves que celles qui existent déjà.
Why these changes? What is fundamentally wrong with the democratically elected leaders?
Can the jurisdiction of the Ecowas Court of Justice be expanded to include the determination of the legality of presidential term extension, because already the jurisdiction is limited. Contentious jurisdiction, advisory jurisdiction, arbitrary jurisdiction. So can it be extended to make a declaration on the constitutionality of any attempt to extend presidential terms? And how can that be enforced? It can be enforced by the authority of heads of state and government.
We shouldn't overburden the Ecowas Court of Justice and national judiciaries with the responsibility and role that is not theirs.
Cumprimentar os distintos participantes.
When it comes to the obligation to protect, and if the obligation to protect is on the state, it then means that it is only what is protected in constitutional and legal frameworks that could be called human rights law. ECOWAS is fortunate to have a court of justice with an iconistic bench which has enforced the duty of member states to uphold the precepts of human rights. And the ECCJ has lived up to expectation of the saying that judiciary is the common hope of last man.
Information sur les compétences de la Cour de justice de la CEDEAO, qui n'est pas une cour constitutionnelle. C'est une cour de défense des droits de l'homme, certes, mais pas une cour constitutionnelle. Alors, qu'est-ce qui se passe lorsque des questions constitutionnelles non résolues au niveau des États se posent, et de manière définitive?
If you don't want the cat to eat the fish, do not allow the fish to smell. The bedrock behind some of the unconventional changes in government begins from the process far before elections. And if for any reasons ECOWAS must ensure that these unconventional means are thwarted, then we should start reviewing the activities leading to elections in our various countries.
ECOWAS in the past was using this same protocol, supplementary protocol, was what ECOWAS used in 2009 or there to stop the government in Niger, the president from changing, he wanted to disband the parliament. ECOWAS commission stood up against it. Here in 2011, ECOWAS decided not to send election observers here because their fact-finding mission, the report said that there was no conducive atmosphere for elections to take place. And they didn't stop there. They went ahead, they refused to recognize the outcome of that election that former President Jammeh conducted.
We need to begin to develop a democratic culture. We need to begin to develop the culture of the things that we have. And states we need to begin to assess states on the convergence principles. We mustn't wait for a military coup to happen.
Propose un renforcement du cadre de suivi des principes politiques et démocratiques dans les États membres pour prévenir les conflits liés à la tenue d'élections libres, justes et transparentes. Et la Commission de la CEDEAO pourrait jouer davantage de rôle en interagissant activement avec certaines franges des sociétés civiles. La deuxième recommandation est relative à l'application effective et intelligente par tous les États membres des sanctions ciblées à l'encontre des responsables des régimes non démocratiques et anticonstitutionnels.
It should be part of ECOWAS' mandate to put in place an oversight compliance system which audits not only member state compliance, but their capacity to comply. The outcome of such an audit would inform the design of a capacity building program to support member states and ensure compliance.
Direitos humanos e na manutenção do Estado de Direito e da democracia constitucional na comunidade.
It is good to have theoretically impartial judges who decide election disputes. And the judges are supposed to be insulated from politics and all that. However, we should recognize that judges are unelected and, in quotes, unaccountable. And yet we are vesting in them the duty to determine the people's will. What is worse? Because we are vesting the determination of elections in judiciaries, politicians try to exploit this by investing and cultivating judiciaries, sometimes over time, in order to advance their electoral victories. We need to revisit the enforcement capacity of the Ecowas Court, distinct from the indirect enforcement through member states. We need to allow an opening there which makes the state know that if they do not enforce those decisions, there is a small gap somewhere that can be used for enforcement, and that it is better for them to go ahead and enforce them than to allow the court to proceed somehow with another enforcement mechanism.
Également, s'agissant des réformes préconisées dans les arrêts de la Cour de justice de la CEDEAO, il est opportun que des commissions de veille parlementaire soient mises en place pour aller dans le sens des réformes législatives que la CEDEAO a recommandées dans ses arrêts.
National courts must be independent of political influence to be able to uphold human rights, rule of law, or constitutional democracy. Otherwise, those courts that are meant to protect citizens will actually be used to wreak havoc on citizens. I think that is very important.
The ECOWAS court needs to microlize, what I call microlizing ECOWAS law. What I mean by microlizing ECOWAS law, just distinguishing between the macro and the micro. That ECOWAS law, and I think the point has been made earlier by someone, I can't remember if it was Prof. Okay? That ECOWAS law shouldn't be out there and it shouldn't be up there. ECOWAS law should be de-eliticized. We should remove the elitist aspect of ECOWAS law. Sometimes there's a sense that ECOWAS itself as a project belongs to politicians. And then when you remove the political class, perhaps the elite. And so the average person on the street doesn't speak of ECOWAS law. The court, as the last frontier for interpreting the law and enforcing the law, may be interested in how the law is microlized, how the law is taken to the grassroots level, so that in the explication of local laws, in the implementation of local laws, countries are encouraged so to take into account ECOWAS law.
Para poder estar aqui presente na conferência sobrenada o tema.
The question will ask, the member states, are they willing to comply with the object and purpose of the ECOWAS revised treaty or the protocols on the court or on the judgments of the court? The judgments of the ECOWAS Court of Justice are community obligations. They are community obligations that, because those judgments are binding on the member states. The revised treaty clearly says so, that the judgments of the court are binding on all member states, institutions, individuals, and corporate bodies.
Normalmente, a matéria relativa à execução é muito lacônica, é muito escassa. Não se encontra conjunto vasto e adequado de disposições que regulam a questão da execução. Por essa razão, a discussão de tema como este tem uma importância, ou ganha uma importância adicional, porque, de facto, como disse o meu colega,
estamos perante uma realidade em que há uma enorme quantidade de decisões do Tribunal de Justiça da CDAO que estão aquém do seu cumprimento efetivo. Portanto, isso é um problema que existe.
After 3 days of brainstorming, the conference culminated in a closing session on the 4th day.
The report has been redrafted or modified or edited to reflect.
The conference report and communique were adopted as the 2023 International Conference wrapped up.
I would like to inform the higher table that the report should stand and be considered adopted in the absence of an open objection for this purpose.
The recommendations from this conference should be sufficient to generate processes that ultimately ensure Ecowas' zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government goes beyond rhetoric to reality.
Les diverses contributions. Vice President of the Community Court of Justice, Justice Quatara, acknowledged the depth of contributions made by the conference participants to a theme critical to the contemporary development of the West African community.
Et de remercier leurs auteurs.
And did the conference achieve its objectives?
The theme has been very current and it has been very appropriate.
La conférence, de mon point de vue, a atteint ses objectifs en ce qu'elle nous a permis d'échanger avec non seulement les membres de la Cour de justice de la CEDEAO, mais aussi des procureurs, des présidents des Cours suprêmes, des présidents des juridictions nationales, mais également des activistes des droits de l'homme et bien d'autres participants tels que les barreaux des différents pays membres de l'espace communautaire de la CEDEAO, mais aussi d'autres personnes qui sont venues sur invitation de la Cour de justice de la CEDEAO.
It's an outreach program, that's number one. Two, they are also communicating with member states through the conference, which is very, very essential because member states, including institutions of Ecowas, are beginning to actually understand the activities of Ecowas, the limitations of Ecowas, and the rate of performance of Ecowas from where they can actually judge them in terms of actually whether they are doing the right thing or wrong thing, or whether they are actually compromising or they are actually making headways in terms of the development of their jurisprudence, even though at this stage, in fairness to the court, it's limited only to human rights issues.
The creation of the Ecowas Court of Justice, is timely, is good. But for me, the sticky point here is that of the court's jurisdiction.
So the question then is, how do we sensitize governments to abide by the norms? And secondly, how do we mainstream ECOWAS norms so that the ordinary citizen in all the countries recognize that the norms that apply to them include not only the country's laws, but also the various ECOWAS protocols and regimes. So the theme has been very current and it has been very appropriate.
Well, this conference, I think, is the best. Looking at the quality of the resource persons, actually professors, jurists, and all that. And the quality of their presentations were very good, and the interactions with the participant was very good, and the outcome, I hope, is the best among all the 3 conferences we've had. Talking about the theme, you realize that people talk about elections and so many other things. They all go to the human rights issues, because if there's free and fair elections, there's peace and all that. The number of cases in the court, once there's peace and serenity in all the countries, of course, people are not going to bother themselves with violation of human rights. Most of the cases border on elections.
Mama Tumba,